Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So today I'd like to go over how to solo tank Demogorgon. This is probably one of the hardest challenges as a tank right now, at least with regards to relevant content, and we're going to be doing it on our paladin tank, which is maybe a little bit more challenging than if you're on a fighter. And we don't do the best job here at the beginning, I'll admit. We didn't get the timing right too well with our smites, but yeah, you can see I have switched back to Smite just because it's a trial and it requires you to have a hard taunt to make up for your mistakes, specifically in phase 2. We'll get into that when we do. But basically Demogorgon is going to just keep attacking you. He has some areas and you'll note that they're like purple. You want to move out of those. It's really important that you do so. Do not get hit by them, even though you're a tank, because they give you madness. For each stack of madness you have, you lose damage. And additionally, he will put this laser on you, which will give you a stack which will increase the damage you take each time. Now, I'm not exactly sure how it works. It probably just reduces your defensive stat all the way to like 0% when you get to a certain amount of stats. And that doesn't really make it so that you can't survive. It'll make it so yes, you do take a bit more damage, but not overly huge amount. Like, it's very survivable. And of course, if you run with a paladin healer, even better for you as the tank to be able to survive. Those added shields are a wonder for that, and they'll also help the DPS if they're using the shield as well, because there are some mechanics which, if you maybe made a mistake here or there, or you have a few more extra madness decks, you can end up getting one shot. So you can see how we're just fighting Demogorgon here, just moving out of the areas and blocking the hits when he attacks us, and that's really it. Just make sure you have the threat. And as the paladin tank, you can use I'm using Smite, Vow, Binding Oath, and then just using that daily power, the Divine Protector with its corresponding Shield of the God's Feet, just to make sure that we have that added survivability. We could run like Shield of Faith with our Sheltering Light, maybe. Depends how confident you are. Now again, here we not the smoothest, but nobody died there luckily. And here again, I believe I lose aggro to Aragon, but again, he manages to not die to that hit. Again, not ideal. I am still learning in here, and I can definitely perfect this even more. But I want to come out with this video sooner than late to help you guys out. Now, the most important thing with this boss is this mechanic, where you can see I run behind him, and he makes this big swing with his glowing hand. If he hits you with that swing, which we might get hit by that a bit later, he will basically make it so that you have zero threat anymore. And that's pretty terrible as tank, because then he'll go and attack all the DPS. So it's really important you move away from him at that point. Again, every time he comes back from like that charge, he's going to like either do a stomp or this swing. And he'll always do the swing, even though he might do the stomp. And yeah, okay, it's a bit of RNG, but just be prepared for that big swipe where he'll basically slap you and take all your aggro. And so again, like I was doing, move around him and you'll be perfectly fine. So you're going to have to maybe stack a bit of movement speed. It'll help you out a bit more. I run personally with the movement speed enchantment in here, and with about 50% movement speed, it's usually perfectly fine. Again, it's all about the timing and keeping an eye out for exactly when that happens. Now, right here, you can see I'm not sure why he's still facing the DPS after jumping at me. Like, I had the full threat. But as a DPS, you got to pay attention as well to the boss and its mechanics, and move your ass away if that situation happens. Here you can see his hand lit up, but he didn't actually make any animation. You need to be aware of that. That can happen many times, and it's quite frustrating. Rip those two guys. You need to be just careful. Always just keep an eye out on that hand. It's his left hand, so on the right side of you, and that big arc, that big swing. And you get hit by that, and it can be really bad. Sometimes if you do get hit by it, you might be lucky that he goes and does the charge right after, and then you'll be able to get back up and like smite him just before he runs off with the charge. That can happen, but just nail down the timing of that and move your ass. Garistro is otherwise, yeah, pretty boring. It's just a big long fight, just same mechanics over and over, moving away from that swing and just tanking his hits. He can hit pretty hard, so I'd be wary of that. And so we are just taking as much survivability as we can here. We are running with an augment because we got 2 other healers which can run like the tutor and the yeah, whatever you want to run, like Dritz or the Spine Devil. And so it's not such a big deal for me to run an augment here. Here we went to the well to cleanse our madness there, because you will get madness stacks over time like everybody else. Even if you just avoid all of those purple areas, you still get madness because of that scream during when Demogorgon's there, but then also those red areas during this phase. And so Garistro is fairly straightforward. Once you get the rhythm, the timing, the patterns down, he's not too much trouble. Just be aware he can hit like a freaking truck. Yeah, that was not ideal. Extending the duration that we have to fight Garistro. Well, and here again, yeah, that was unfortunate the way he was facing when he jumped back. I'm sure I can optimize that a bit more, just predicting exactly where he's going to land, and so that we're on like the opposite side of where the DPS are, so that, yeah, he doesn't end up killing them like we did that. That person actually got a disconnect as well. And here I believe we can end our Garistro phase. Okay, no, they didn't get it in the gold portal there. That's unfortunate. But here we're just moving him, positioning him, and I just call artifacts here because I want this over with. I'm worried Garistro will kill me or something, and that, yeah. Anyway, better to get it over with and move on to the next phase. We do have 11 madness stacks there. We need to be careful. We ideally need to get a well before we go into the last phase there with Demogorgon again. So I'm looking for a well, and I'm just going to camp this one over here. We did phase then, and I would ideally wait for this well to spawn before fighting Demogorgon. But yeah, you can't really do that. You gotta take the aggro, so we go over and we smite him. The well spawns just there behind me, and so we need to bring Demogorgon kind of close enough to it. If you go too far away from Demogorgon, he will string you up and he'll deal a ton of damage over time. It's survivable, but not ideal. And yeah, so either you could have healers on the ball and you run away, but there's not much point in running away because he'll just stun you and you won't be going anywhere. So just make sure you don't go too far away from him. It basically stops you from just kiting him around the entire arena, stopping you from like avoiding all his damage like we've done in the past. And so with this phase, again, it's very similar to the first phase. You're just tanking Demogorgon and moving away from those purple areas. Yeah, you'll have those tentacles now here as well, which just means more purple areas to avoid. This one specifically you want to avoid because it gives you a ton of those stacks. Now you can see a piece of my mind is shattered and attacks your allies. That means my paranoid has spawned. I need to make sure I have its attention, and then I can just like spam it with my at-wills and we can kill it fairly quickly. You'll also have like AoE damage from the DPS most of the time, which will also help with that if the paranoid is close to the boss, so that helps. But otherwise, make sure that paranoid dies as quickly as possible. You can put a few smites on it. Here's like the super annoying tentacle. If you get that one spawning on you all the time, it can be so frustrating. And just make sure you're calling artifacts every minute. Even though my artifact is locked, we can still call it with the command and use our mount power, because your mount powers don't get locked until I believe 20 stacks, 25 stacks, I can't remember. But anyway, just make sure you're tanking his hits. He will again deal a bit more damage over time when you take more and more of those stacks, but it's nothing that's not too survivable. Of course, you do want to have like 75k item level with about decent stats. I'm personally running with about 85% defense, about 70% critical avoidance, and about 70% awareness. That goes to 90% with my daily power, which I use quite often, as you'll see. and then not really stacking any deflect. Here you can see we have our paranoid again, and we can go and like use a few smites on it, and you can see you do a pretty decent amount of damage to it with that. And here we go, call artifacts again, and not too bad. This phase, the biggest trouble is just killing those paranoid delusions in time and just killing the boss in time, because you only have 5 minutes before you don't get any more wells. Like, he'll shatter them all, and then nobody can cleanse their madness. And just make sure you're always moving out of those purple areas, especially the ones from Demogorgon, as they'll give you like 5 madness stacks, sometimes even more, and that can just be a real bummer to you, because they'll lock out your powers, can't use your daily anymore, can't use your artifact, and you could get to a point where you can't use any encounters, you can't use your stone of health, and you get really screwed over. But you can see we don't have to take too many wells as long as we play the mechanics properly and we position ourselves. And that's about it for Demogorgon Master and solo tanking. I hope this was somewhat insightful, you guys. Maybe you learned a thing or two. If you have any tips and tricks of your own, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And well, you can get quite a decent amount of loot from this dungeon, because that set still sells really well. Like, it's one of the best sets for damage dealers to use. So it's still selling upwards of 500k to 1 million plus on some of those pieces. So not something you want to miss out on too much if you're capable on playing this content. I will say though, it's pretty boring. Massive thank you to all of these channel members, and we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.